The night I finally understood what was happening to me, I was sitting on the bathroom floor of our house in Asheville, holding a pregnancy test that wouldn't stop shaking because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my husband was downstairs whistling, like a man who had no idea his wife was about to discover she'd been losing her mind for 8 months for a reason. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter much for this story, but if you need something to call me, you can call me what my mother called me growing up, which was Tess, short for Teresa. I was 31 years old when this happened, working as a freelance graphic designer out of the converted sunroom of our craftsman bungalow in North Carolina, and I had spent the previous 8 months convinced I was dying. It started small. I want you to understand that, because I think a lot of women watching this will recognize it. It didn't start with anything dramatic. It started with me being tired. Just tired. The kind of tired where you blink at your computer screen at 2 in the afternoon and your eyes feel like they're full of sand. I'd been freelancing for 6 years and never had a problem with energy. Suddenly, I was taking naps at 3 p.m. and waking up at 6 p.m., with drool on the pillow, more exhausted than when I'd lain down. My husband, who I'll call him what I used to call him in my head when I was annoyed with him, which was the man, told me I was probably just burned out. He said maybe I needed to take on fewer clients. He said maybe I should stop drinking so much coffee and switch to the green smoothies he made me every morning. He'd started making them right around then, actually, late February, just after Valentine's Day. He bought a Vitamix and a bunch of organic spinach and a cookbook called something like Cleans Your Way to a New You, and he started leaving a tall glass of green sludge on the counter for me every morning before he left for work. I thought it was sweet. I really did. I told my sister-in-law about it at brunch, and she rolled her eyes and said, "Must be nice." I told my mom about it on the phone, and she said, "You got lucky with that one. He'd been a good husband, 5 years married, no kids yet, but we'd been talking about it. He worked as a regional manager for a logistics company, decent salary, drove a clean used Honda, came home for dinner most nights, called me babe, and meant it. So when I started getting tired, I drank the smoothies. When I started getting headaches that wrapped around the back of my skull like a hot wire, I drank the smoothies. When my hair started coming out in the shower in clumps that looked like wet animal pelts, I drank the smoothies. He said it would help. He said his coworker's wife had the same thing and she'd cleared it up with diet. He said maybe we should think about IVF eventually because clearly something was off with my hormones. By June, I was forgetting things. I'd walk into rooms and stand there with my mouth slightly open, trying to remember why I'd gone in. I'd start a sentence and lose the back half of it somewhere on the way to my mouth. I'd pull up the wrong file for a client, send a logo to the wrong email, miss deadlines I'd been hitting in my sleep for years. My income started slipping. 2 clients dropped me. I cried in the shower so my husband wouldn't hear, then realized later that the shower was where my hair was falling out, so I'd cry and watch myself molt, and that was a bad summer. He was so patient. That's the thing. That's the thing that still gets me. He was so patient. He'd hold my hand on the couch and say, "Babe, you've got to see a doctor." He'd say, "I'm worried about you." He'd say, "I love you. We'll figure this out." And then he'd hand me another smoothie. And I'd drink it. And I'd thank him. I finally went to my primary care doctor in late September. She'd been my doctor since I moved to Asheville at 26. Her name was Dr. Halverson, and she was a no-nonsense woman in her late 50s who wore her gray hair in a bun and didn't believe in sugarcoating anything. She'd seen me through a kidney stone and a sprained ankle and the year I tried to go gluten-free for no good reason. She knew me. She took one look at me in her exam room and said, "Teresa, what is going on?" And I burst into tears. Just absolutely came apart on the exam table. Paper crinkling under me, sobbing about how I thought I had cancer or early onset Alzheimer's or some neurological thing they were going to find on an MRI, and how my husband had been so good to me, and how scared I was that he was going to be a widower at 35. She let me cry. Then she handed me a tissue and she said, very calmly, "We're going to run every test I can think of. Don't decide what you have until I tell you what you have." So she drew blood. A lot of blood. 8 vials, I remember, because I counted them as the nurse switched them out. And I made a joke about how I felt like a juice box, and the nurse didn't laugh. And that should have told me something about how I looked. Dr. Halverson called me on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk, trying to finish a brochure layout for a vineyard in Sonoma, and my phone buzzed and her name came up. I picked up, and she said, "Teresa, I need you to come in tomorrow morning. First thing, don't eat breakfast. I want to run one more panel." I asked her what was wrong. She paused, long enough that I heard my own heartbeat, and then she said, "I'd rather talk in person. Just come in. And Teresa, come alone. I want you to sit with that for a second. Come alone." My doctor of 5 years, who knew I was married, who'd met my husband at a Christmas party once at the country club, telling me to come to my appointment without him. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to my husband and watched him breathe and tried to figure out what could possibly be so bad that my doctor needed to tell me without him there. I thought maybe it was an STI. I thought maybe she'd found something embarrassing. I thought maybe she'd lost her mind. I never, not once in those long dark hours, thought what it actually was. I drove to her office at 7:30 the next morning. She was already there, in her white coat, no makeup, hair down for once. She brought me into her office, not the exam room, her office. She had pictures of her grandkids on the desk. She closed the door. She sat down across from me, and she put her hands flat on the desk like she was trying to keep them still. She said, "Teresa, your blood work came back with severely elevated levels of thallium and cadmium and arsenic." I had the lab run it twice because I didn't believe it the first time. I stared at her. I said, "I don't know what that means." She said, "It means you're being poisoned. Slowly, over a long period of time. These are heavy metals, and they don't show up like this by accident. Not in someone with your lifestyle. You haven't been working in a factory. You haven't been drinking well water. Someone is doing this to you. I want to tell you what that felt like, but I don't think I can. I think the closest I can come is to say that the floor disappeared. Not metaphorically, physically. I felt like I was sitting in a chair that was floating in space, and everything I'd built my life on for 5 years had just evaporated, and I was alone, and I was poisoned, and I was going to throw up. I said the only thing I could think of, which was, "That can't be right." She said, "It is right. I had it run twice." I said, "But who would? Who would?" And she looked at me. Just looked at me. And she didn't say his name. She didn't have to. Because the only person who controlled my food, my drinks, my supplements, my smoothies, my coffee, my water bottles, the only person who handed me a glass of anything every single morning of my life for the last 8 months was the man I married. She said, "Teresa, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to refer you to a toxicologist at Duke. I'm also, with your permission, going to make a call to a detective I know. But before any of that happens, I need you to do something incredibly hard. I need you to go home and act normal. Do not confront him. Do not let on. Do you understand me?" I said, "Why?" She said, "Because if you tip him off, he will run, and he will get away with this. Or worse, he will accelerate. People who do this when they feel cornered, they finish the job. I cannot describe to you the drive home from her office. I cannot. I remember stopping at a red light on Marymount Avenue and watching a woman walk a golden retriever across the crosswalk and thinking, she has no idea. She has no idea that this is happening to someone in the car next to her. I remember pulling into our driveway and sitting in my car for 45 minutes before I could open the door. I remember walking into my own house and my husband calling out from the kitchen, "Hey babe, how was your appointment?" And I remember the sound of my own voice, completely steady, completely normal, saying, "Oh, fine, she just wanted to follow up on the blood work. Everything's good." He was at the stove. He turned around and smiled at me. He had on the apron my mother bought him for Christmas. He said, "I made you a smoothie. It's in the fridge. I want to tell you that I poured it out the second he left for work. But that's not what I did. What I did was kiss him on the cheek, take the smoothie out of the fridge, and pretend to drink it while he watched. I pretended to drink the poison my husband had made for me, and I smiled at him while I did it. And the entire time I was looking at his face and trying to see who he was. He left for work at 8:30. I waited until I heard his car turn the corner. Then I went to the kitchen sink and I poured every drop of that smoothie down the drain, and I ran the disposal for 2 minutes, and I rinsed the glass 3 times, and then I sat down on the kitchen floor and I screamed into a dish towel until my throat was raw. Then I called Dr. Halverson. She put me in touch with a detective named Lieutenant Marisol Ray at the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop in Black Mountain, 20 minutes outside the city, because she said she didn't want me being seen going into a precinct. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with short dark hair and a wedding ring and very steady hands. She let me talk for an hour straight without interrupting. Then she said, "I believe you, and I want to help you. But the way we help you is going to require you to be the bravest person you've ever been." She explained that we needed evidence, real evidence. The blood work alone wouldn't be enough because his lawyer would just argue that I'd ingested it some other way or that someone else had access. We needed to catch him doing it. We needed to catch him buying it. We needed a paper trail, a video trail, a financial trail, and we needed it before he caught on. So we built a plan. I bought a small camera at an electronics store an hour away, paying in cash, and I hid it on top of the cabinets in the kitchen, angled down at the counter where he made my smoothies. I bought a second one for the bathroom where he sometimes left my vitamins. I changed the password on my email. I opened a new bank account at a credit union he didn't know about, and I started funneling small payments from my freelance work into it, the kind of amounts he wouldn't notice missing from the joint account. I made copies of our tax returns, our mortgage paperwork, my marriage license, my birth certificate, and I put them in a safety deposit box at that same credit union. And I kept pretending to drink the smoothies. Every morning, every single morning, I'd pour it down the drain after he left, and I'd eat real food, and I'd watch the footage from the kitchen camera that night while he was at his weekly poker game with his coworkers, and I'd watch my husband, the man I had stood at an altar with 5 years before, pull a small amber bottle out of the back of the spice cabinet and unscrew the cap and let 3 precise drops fall into the blender before he added the spinach. He did it like he'd done it 1,000 times, because he had. Lieutenant Ray and I figured out where he'd been getting it after about 3 weeks. He had a coworker, a guy named Bradley, who worked in the warehouse division and had access to industrial cleaning supplies. The bottle he was using contained a concentrated solution typically used to strip metal surfaces, but in tiny doses. Dissolved in something acidic and sugary like a smoothie, it would deliver a slow accumulation of heavy metals into the bloodstream. Bradley apparently sold it to him under the table for cash. We never figured out exactly what story my husband told him to justify wanting it, and honestly, I don't want to know. What I wanted to know, and what kept me up at night, was why. He didn't have a girlfriend. I checked. Lieutenant Ray checked. There was no other woman. There was no second family. There was no secret child. So I sat with that question for weeks, watching my husband make me poison and kiss me goodnight and rub my feet on the couch, and I could not figure out what I had done to deserve this, or what he could possibly want. And then one afternoon in late October, I found it. I was looking through his desk drawer for a stamp. That's it. Just a stamp. I needed to mail a birthday card to my aunt in Charleston, and his desk drawer was stuck, the way it always was, so I had to yank it. And when I yanked it, a folder slid forward from the back of the drawer, and a stack of papers fanned out across the bottom. The top one was a life insurance policy, in my name, taken out 2 weeks before he started making me smoothies, $800,000. I sat down in his desk chair. I picked up the policy with both hands so I could keep it steady, and I read every page, and then I read the page underneath it, which was a printout of a Google search history from a private browser, which he'd apparently printed for some reason, maybe to study his own work. Search terms included things like how long heavy metal poisoning takes to be fatal, symptoms of cadmium exposure, thallium half-life human body, can autopsies detect heavy metal poisoning, pages and pages of it. Dated from January through August. He'd been planning this since before our anniversary. Underneath that was a notebook. His handwriting. Tiny, cramped, the kind of handwriting he used for grocery lists. And it was a ledger of dosages, dates and amounts. January 18th, Sue drops. January 22 drops. February 22 drops. February 14, 3 drops. Valentine's Day. He'd put 3 drops in my smoothie on Valentine's Day. The day after, he gave me a heart-shaped pendant and told me he couldn't imagine his life without me. I called Lieutenant Ray from his desk chair. She told me to photograph everything and put it back exactly where I'd found it. She told me we were close. She told me to hold on a little longer. I held on. God help me, I held on. I made dinner. I watched television. I let him hold my hand. I went to bed next to him. I lay in the dark with my eyes open and stared at the ceiling and tried to remember every promise this man had ever made to me and tried to understand how a person could look you in the eye and say forever while measuring out drops of poison in the next room. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, Lieutenant Ray called me at 9:15 and said, "We're ready." "Are you?" I said yes. The arrest happened at his office. They didn't want to do it at our house, in case he had access to weapons, or in case he had access to weapons, or in case he tried to destroy evidence. They walked in during his 10:30 meeting and they put him in handcuffs in front of his boss and his co-workers and the receptionist who'd given me a Christmas card every year. Lieutenant Ray told me later that he didn't say anything. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask why. He just looked at the carpet and let them lead him out. The charges were aggravated assault, attempted murder, and conspiracy. They added a count of insurance fraud once the policy came out in discovery. Bradley from the warehouse got pulled in too for distribution, and he flipped immediately and testified against my husband in exchange for a reduced sentence. The trial took 11 months. I won't walk you through all of it, because honestly some of it I don't remember. I remember the smell of the courthouse, which was lemon cleaner and old paper. I remember the prosecutor, a woman named something like Adeline Briscoe, who wore tortoiseshell glasses and made my husband's defense attorney look like a clown. I remember sitting on the stand and being asked to identify the man who had poisoned me, and pointing to him across the courtroom and watching him not look up. He never looked at me. Not once. Not the whole trial. The jury came back in less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 35 years without the possibility of parole. I want to tell you that I felt relief. I want to tell you that I felt vindicated. But what I actually felt, sitting in that courtroom in a navy blue dress my mother had bought me for the occasion, was a kind of bone-deep tiredness that had nothing to do with thallium. It was the tiredness of having loved someone who was building a coffin for you the whole time. It was the tiredness of being right when you so desperately wanted to be wrong. I sold the house. I didn't even go back to pack it. My sister and my mother flew in from Pittsburgh and they boxed everything up and they shipped what I wanted and donated the rest. I didn't want the couch. I didn't want the dishes. I didn't want the wedding photos. I didn't want the Vitamix. I moved to Burlington, Vermont. I picked it because I had never been there and because nobody I knew lived there. I rented a small apartment over a bakery and I started over. I kept my freelance business because my clients had been kind during the trial and I built it back up. I went to therapy twice a week for 2 years. I learned to cook for myself again. I learned to trust my own appetite, my own thirst, my own body. It took me a long time to drink anything anyone else handed me, even water, even from my own mother. There's a part of you that doesn't come back after something like this. I won't lie to you about that, but there's also a part of you that gets harder and clearer and more yourself than you ever were before. I want to tell you the things I learned, because I think this is the part that matters more than the story. I learned that the most dangerous person in your life is almost always someone you trust. The statistics on this are brutal. Look them up. Look at how many women in this country are killed every year by partners or ex-partners. Look at the spike during separations. Look at the use of insurance policies. This isn't rare. This isn't a true crime podcast aberration. This is a Tuesday in America. I learned that financial independence is not optional. I had a freelance business, thank God. I had my own income, thank God. But I also had a joint account he could have drained and a credit history tangled with his and a house in both our names. If you are a woman watching this and you do not have your own bank account, your own credit card, your own savings, and your own emergency fund somewhere your partner cannot access, Please stop everything you are doing and start today, not tomorrow. Today, I learned that doctors save lives in ways nobody talks about. Dr. Halverson saved mine. She didn't have to make that phone call. She didn't have to risk being wrong, or being sued, or being unprofessional. She could have ordered another test and waited. She didn't. She looked at the numbers, and she did the math, and she told me to come alone, and she put me in touch with a detective. There is a chance, a real chance, that I would not be here if she had been any other doctor. If you have a good doctor, you hold on to her. You hold on to her for dear life. I learned that your instincts know things before your mind does. For 8 months, I felt wrong. I felt sick. I felt like something was off. And every time I tried to name it, my husband or my friends or my mother gave me a different answer, a more comfortable answer. You're burned out. You're hormonal. You're stressed. None of them were lying. None of them knew. But I knew. Some part of me knew. And I would tell you, if you are sitting at home right now feeling that something is wrong in your life and you can't explain it, please listen. Please, your body is not lying to you. Your gut is not lying to you. Find a doctor, find a friend, find a stranger in a coffee shop, but say it out loud to someone. Don't drink the smoothie. The pregnancy test, by the way, I lied earlier. There wasn't one. I started this story with a pregnancy test because I wanted you to feel what I felt that morning in Dr. Halverson's office, which was the feeling of holding a small piece of plastic and waiting for it to tell you what your life is going to be. I'm sorry for the misdirection, but I think you understand. I never had children. I think about that sometimes. I think about the version of my life where I had said yes to him a year earlier, when he first started bringing it up, and what would have happened to those children when he was eventually arrested, or when I was eventually dead. I think about whether he would have poisoned them too to collect on a different policy. I don't know. I'll never know. And I have made my peace with not knowing. I'm 36 now. I have a dog, a rescue mutt named Pepper, who I picked up at a shelter in Burlington 2 summers ago, and she is the great love of my life. I have a small business and a small apartment and a small circle of friends who know what happened to me and don't make me talk about it unless I want to. I have a therapist who I still see once a month. I have my mother on speed dial. I have a savings account in my own name with enough in it to disappear if I ever need to, though I don't think I'm going to need to anymore. I don't date. People ask me that sometimes. I might, someday. I'm not close to it. But I'm in no rush, and I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than ever be that wrong about another person again. Solitude is not the worst thing that can happen to a woman. There are much, much worse things, and one of them used to make me smoothies every morning. If you are still here, listening to me tell this, I want to say one more thing. If something feels wrong in your life right now, you are not crazy. You are not paranoid. You are not ungrateful. You are not ungrateful. You are not making it up. You are paying attention. That is all. You are paying attention. And paying attention is what saved my life. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And please, please do not let anyone you love convince you that you are losing your mind. Sometimes you are not losing your mind. Sometimes you are the only one in the room who can still see. I think about him sometimes. Not the way you might expect, not with longing, not with hate, just with a kind of quiet curiosity about what makes a person become the thing he became. He wasn't born planning to poison me. Somewhere along the way, between the man who proposed to me on a dock in Maine and the man who measured drops into a blender on a Tuesday morning in February, something rotted. And I have spent a lot of time, more than I'd like to admit, trying to understand the slow, ordinary nature of that rot. I think it started small. A resentment he didn't name. A debt he didn't tell me about. A future he wanted that didn't include me, but did include the $800,000 on my life. And once he let himself imagine it, once he couldn't stop. Every drop after that was just bookkeeping. What I learned, and what I hope you take with you, is that character is not a thing you have. It is a thing you build every day with the tiny choices nobody sees. He chose the bottle in the spice cabinet. He chose to smile at me over breakfast. He chose over and over for 8 months, and each choice made the next one easier. That is how decent people become monstrous. Not in a single moment, but in 10,000 small surrenders. So I want to leave you with 3 things, and they are the only 3 things I trust anymore. The first is your conscience. Guard it, feed it. When something inside you says this is wrong, even if the thing is small, even if nobody else sees it, listen. The people who poison their wives didn't start with poison. They started with lies they let themselves tell. Don't let yourself tell them. The second is your mind. Sharpen it. Read. Ask questions. Learn how money works, how the law works, how your own body works. Dr. Gelt, Halverson saved my life because she knew what those numbers meant on a piece of paper. And Lieutenant Ray saved my life because she knew how to build a case. And I saved my own life because I finally learned how to read a life insurance policy. Knowledge is not optional. It is the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. The third is your strength, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that lets you pretend to drink the smoothie while your heart is breaking because the alternative is dying. The kind that lets you sit on a witness stand and say his name out loud. The kind that lets you start over in a town you've never been to, with a dog you've never met, in an apartment where nothing reminds you of who you used to be. You build that strength one small, honest day at a time. And when the worst happens, and sometimes it does, you will find that you already had it. You just didn't know its name yet.